All right, everyone, the neocons managed to do it again. The Senate just passed the $95 billion omnibus aid package, which is going to be money earmarked for Ukraine, Taiwan, Israel, and Gaza. Actually, there's some Gaza aid in there in the Israel-Gaza portion. Link in the description, archived, of course. Of course, I think that $95 billion would have been better spent maybe addressing the U.S. border, the migrant crisis, etc., homelessness, systemic poverty, or something like that. Liberals used to be on board with spending money on these things, although they never allocated it in a meaningful manner. Now we just throw money to foreign nations in an unlimited sense. $95 billion is a lot of money. That would have fed a lot of homeless people. It would have allowed a lot more enforcement at the southern border. Just imagine how much wall you could build with that much money. Instead, we're wasting it on pointless wars and things like that. The solution to all of these situations that this bill particularly attempts to address is quite simple. Israel v. Gaza never would have popped off, neither Russia v. Ukraine, were it not for the insane lack of leadership that we see from the federal government currently. The Biden administration is simply very poor at diplomacy, and with the lack of a central, strong Western apparatus, without a unified message to actually be there, there's nothing really to constrain this sort of thing from popping up. That's, well, why do you think Taiwan is included in the bill? Taiwan has not been attacked. It's just that they think, well, Russia's popping off. Israel and Hamas are popping off. Well, what else is in the cards? Maybe we should be sending more aid to South Korea. Maybe we should be sending tanks to Guyana. The Venezuelans have threatened to annex 2/3 of their country's land area in order to gain a bunch of offshore oil more than anything else. These things are popping off because we have no strong centralized Western leadership adequately capable of responding to antagonistic scenarios abroad. So that's solution number one. With regards to areas that might be attacked, Taiwan would be one of them. What the United States government should do is simply use diplomacy and its lobbying capabilities, sweeten the deal a little bit here and there, for much, much less than $95 billion, to encourage these nations to import a bunch of wonderful U.S.-manufactured small arms and things like that, and militarize their population Switzerland style. Venezuela would be a little bit more hesitant to invade Guyana if you had 500,000 well-armed Guyanans as part of a civilian militia. It'd be rather difficult to overrun them, because of course tanks can't guard street corners. You could wage a guerrilla war, and it would be a very prolonged one and very expensive, and Maduro and his cronies would think twice. The Chinese would think twice about attempting to attack Taiwan if they knew that there were several million additional militia in the country that had the capability of fighting back, as opposed to generally you have a population that has gone through military training, but they're not generally armed on a regular basis. They would have to resort to an armory system, and even then you wouldn't have sufficient weaponry, sufficient ammunition, and so forth. The U.S. makes great guns. We make great ammo. We can do this. And we'd make money doing it as opposed to sending money to other countries. All that is required is the will and diplomacy to make that happen. Marginalized states like Guyana and Taiwan that have much larger countries adjacent to them that want to take them over or steal part of their land, etc., we should encourage them to arm up. We should have been doing that in Ukraine. The Polish got the memo. Poland not only beefed up its mainline military because they're like, the Russians are pretty close to us, and that could become a problem in the near future. They began militia training for the population. People who hadn't taken militia training were trained on AK-47s. They started doing that a couple of years ago, actually. In fact, I don't even think they waited for the invasion of Ukraine at large. That was post-Crimea, so now you have a considerable number of additional civilians who have military training they might not otherwise have, and marksmanship training and things like that. But then again, the current iteration of the U.S. government doesn't even want U.S. citizens to be able to own guns, apparently, so unfortunately that won't happen. Instead, we're spending limitless amounts of money on propping up other nations. Look at it this way. We're aiding Gaza. Some of that aid goes to Hamas, unfortunately, by the way. We're also aiding Israel. We refuse to admit Palestine to full UN membership. They're an observer kind of quasi-state entity at this time. That just happened the other day. But then we also want a ceasefire. We condemn Israel's actions in certain incursions, but then we say we stand totally with Israel. Look at the messaging of the administration. It's off the chain. It's both fence-straddling and taking up these hard lines with regards to individual situations. I think it genuinely confuses our allies or our partners, and I think that our enemies take advantage of that, or rather states that are more opportunistic, in the Eastern Bloc especially. They're taking advantage of the fact that the United States leadership is dumb, deaf, dumb, and just fucking retarded. European leadership is all over the place. There's a schism going on there over both migrants, that's died down a little bit now, and as well as economic policies, and certainly land usage policies. You should look at the farm protests all over Western Europe at the moment. I notice it doesn't seem to be happening in Hungary. There's probably a reason for that. It doesn't appear to be happening in Slovakia, for example. There's a little bit of a difference there. No, it's in France and Germany and the Netherlands and Belgium and places like that, and shouldn't be necessary at all. Globalism is wreaking havoc in the world. So is state opportunism, but in order to hold the state opportunism thing at bay, you at the very least need to have a strong Western leadership, and you simply don't have that. The American taxpayers are expected to perpetually foot the bill. Like I just filed my taxes, paying a large amount of money in the process. Now, if that was going towards feeding the homeless, building a border wall, you know, can I sponsor like a chunk of border wall or something like that? Is that possible? Because I would much rather use my money for that. Probably, I think you could get several sections built, actually, with the amount that Uncle Sam screws me out of, considering that I pay the self-employment penalty, and it's not pleasant. I'm just thinking how big and great the garden would be if I didn't get penalized for literally taking the initiative to work for myself instead of work for a company. It's bullshit. It's retarded. Imagine how many homeless people could be fed with this amount of money. Imagine how many people could get shelter. Imagine how many roads could be fixed with $95 billion fucking dollars. I mean, it is a lot of money, and we just frittered it away. Now, some people will say, well, yeah, part of this isn't just cold hard cash. It's like, you know, tanks and shit. Well, that's true, but, you know, we paid for them, correct? Money was involved. I mean, that numismatic value does exist. So it's exactly the same thing. It makes no difference. And you have to print more money to cover it. At this point, they're just printing funny money to cover all of these payments anyway. What we should be doing is ramping up industrial production and arming people up to the teeth all around the world in our allied states so that they can't get invaded. So hopefully shit like this happens less often. Then we can absorb the cost later with some of the proceeds that you get from the taxes from the arms industry and stuff like that. But no, they want these wars so they can test their toys. If the Ukrainian people had had a high-end militia system, like a Swiss system, they wouldn't have gotten invaded. The Russians wouldn't bother. It would have been too bloody. Instead, they managed to overrun a significant proportion of the eastern part of the country rather effortlessly, actually. Yeah, they've taken casualties, but you think Putin gives a damn? No, when a casket comes back from some historied commander, it gives him an opportunity to go and salute there and shake hands with the family and say, I'm sorry for your loss, here's a stipend for the rest of your life, and then it looks like he's a good leader and stuff like that. Optically speaking, think what you will about the Russians, about fucking China, certainly, about the Hamas or any of these groups. The optic war is being lost by the West at this moment. And that's because of a failure in leadership. And until we address that, we can expect more of this bullshit. The U.S. Senate sold us out, unfortunately. That's about all. Peace out.